Okay, hello. My name is Sergio Paul. This is my capstone presentation. It is the audio post-production for a short film called Drain. So, Drain is a short film by film major Aidan MacIlvaine. It is essentially an action thriller with a focus on combat. The easiest way I could describe it is a mix between a noir detective kind of film and a karate film. So there's a lot of great fighting, sort of action choreography, that kind of thing, and it has a very dark and dramatic tone that was trying to be captured. And so I did the full audio post-production, which means all the sound effects, all of the dialogue editing, that kind of thing, and also the score alongside that. So this is kind of getting into my timeline, but I can talk a little bit about what that process looks like. So audio post-production for a short film, if you think about a movie that you watch, a lot of the times what you hear in the movie isn't actually what was filmed live on set. So even as I'm talking to you right now, my footsteps on the stage is sound, my voice is sound, but there's other not as obvious things like the sound of the lights, the sounds that are coming from outside, the room tone, if there's any air conditioning going on in the room, that kind of thing. That all has to be included after the fact in audio post-production because they usually aren't able to capture that on set. And that's kind of the job of audio post-production editors, right? So, in my case, this project had a couple of different phases. The first phase was doing tests and sample scenes. I sat down with the director, had a conversation about not only what he wanted for the score, but what he wanted for the movie. And we kind of wanted to focus on that dark theme, that gritty theme, and really focus on the combat as a kind of point there. So, phase two, after I had given him a sample clip and he had approved it, was the background ambience and sound effects. So, the movie was split up into 3 different scenes. There was an alleyway scene, a scene that's in the basement, which you'll see shortly, and another alleyway scene. And part of that background ambience was, for example, in the alleyway, car sounds, city ambience. I got sounds of police sirens in the background, air conditioners, and AC units that were nearby. And I sort of fabricated this sort of soundscape in a city that was used for those scenes. And then in the basement, I had to get a little more creative because there's not as many sounds in the basement. So I got pipe sounds, water kind of running. I threw in some subway, if you've ever been in the basement of this building, the subway runs through. I put some of that in there. And yeah, it's more about getting creative and making it believable for that space. And in that editing process, I used the Soundly file navigation system, which is basically a program where if you have a sound library and you download Soundly, then you can sort of navigate your files easily with a search function, and you can import them directly into Pro Tools with one key press. And that's great for audio editing, and I'll show you a little bit of my session too. So then after that was my Foley recording sessions. Now Foley is sound effects that are recorded for movies, and they're little intricate things, right? So a lot of times Foley recordings will involve footsteps, different cloth sounds, right? So if a character's moving on screen and their clothes are moving, you also have to get the sounds of their clothes. And those are the little intricate things that can't be done by sound effect libraries and adding in different kinds of sound effects. So I did that in the Presser Hall recording studio. That was a lot of fun. I got some pictures on one of the other slides. And then after that, there was the Foley and dialogue editing. So after I got all my sound effects together, I kind of did a preliminary edit. I also edited some dialogue from the production with the Isotope RX11 plugins, which are great, and they work very well. And then phase 5 was the score creation. I made a full score for the movie, mostly involving the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra sound library, but I'm also a violinist and I have a extensive orchestra background. So I did some live violin playing and kind of meshed the two together. And then it was the final mix. Mixing for film is a little bit different for mixing, like in general for music. I did have to mix the score and then mix that mixed score into the film. And it's kind of about getting a balance of the different parts, making sure that the dialogue is at the top, the sound effects can be heard, but the music is high up enough in the mix that it's intense and fulfills the idea. Yeah. So, yeah, as far as the interdisciplinary aspect of it, there was orchestration that went into this. I took an orchestration class that really helped with the score creation. And also, this past summer, it was technically a class, it was an internship as a part of the LA Study Away program where I worked in a sound post-production house in Hollywood. So we were doing a lot of this kind of thing while I was there. And that's kind of where a lot of the experience came from. So, here we go. Here's a clip of said movie, little hallway. Film. And, all right, so here's a look at my recording setup. So this was in the studio. I went to Lowe's and I bought 2 concrete slabs and I put them on the floor with 2 shotgun mics, and I took some sugar packets from the cafe and I sprinkled them on the slabs so that when I was walking on them, it made like a little crunch, almost like an asphalt sound, and that got me some pretty great results. Here is a video of me doing cloth sounds. So I used my jacket, and as the characters were moving and fighting, I was sort of moving along with that. So, and you can kind of see how like you kind of almost have to imitate what's going on screen and kind of make it look believable, you know, with whatever means that you have. So sometimes people will get creative. If they have like bone-breaking sounds, they'll take like celery and like snap it. If you have horse hooves, there's coconuts that you can use to like make clopping sounds on the ground. That's one technique. So yeah, it's all about getting creative and like replicating the sound of whatever you see on screen. And okay, so here was my Pro Tools session. There's a lot. There's sort of a lot more that goes into this than it looks like, right? So I had my session separated into 3 parts, right? There are 3 main parts, right? So you had the dialogue, right? Which is really, the dialogue is kind of the production sound in general. So these are all the lines from the actors, but it's also just little sound effects and stuff that production captured, right? And this is where I used those isotope plugins because there was a lot of noise from the production. There was generators and different things like that. I used, you know, denoise, dehum, that kind of thing to sort of clean up the audio. You know, some EQs, compressors, that kind of thing. And there was sends that then went to a reverb channel, and I used Pro Tools stock like reverb environment plugin called Space, which was great for the hallway scene, specifically because I needed to create that environment like in the hallway to emulate that hallway feel with the reverbs, right? So that all had to be taken into account. These are the music tracks. I had mixed the music in like a separate session and then imported all the files in. But you know, part of the mixing process is of course making sure that all of the music kind of fits in with the score and isn't like, you know, clashing with any like resonances with the sound effects, that kind of thing, make sure it's not clashing. This was the source of my anguish, the FX tab. And effects in movies are split up between 3 groups. They are sound effects, which is the library sound effects that you take from computers, outside sources, whatever, pre-recorded stuff. There's the Foley, like I said, recorded sound effects specifically for specific purposes, and the backgrounds. this was my sound effects folder, and each one of those sound clips is an individual sound effect that I had gotten from the sound effect library. And it's never just one. Like, if you punch a guy, there's like a lot of sounds in that, especially like when you're, you know, oh, whoops. There's a lot of sounds in that when you're trying to do a film, because you can't just use one sound. You have to layer on, you know, the sound of the cloth, the sound of the actual hit. Sometimes if you're doing Foley, right, you'll get like a steak or something and then punch that. Or, you know, if there's a bone breaking, like I said, celery. So each one of these tracks is kind of like a different layer in each sound effect. So even though you're only hearing one punch sound effect, there might be 6 different sounds that go into that. And of course, I had all of these routed to their own reverb, you know, to get that sense of space. Here was the background ambiences. I layered on some different sounds, you know, including cars. You know, I had like a barking dog, like off in the distance for one of the alleyway scenes, that kind of thing. The Foley, I had to get real specific with some of them. There was a knife in one of the beginning scenes that was being like slid across a wall, so I had to get that sound effect in. And yeah, just some various other things. Those were all my prints, so that's where all the tracks were routed to, and then instead of bouncing the session, you just basically solo one of the prints and then you bounce it from there. And that's pretty much the entire session. It's a little more complicated than it looks, but that's the general gist. And before I do questions, so this is not only my last semester at Temple University, but also, I guess, my last assignment / presentation. So I just wanted to say thank you to all my wonderful professors for the past 3.5 years of phenomenal instruction. So thank you so much. Yeah. And now questions.
When you're doing the cloth sounds along the video, how well does that work, like with your reaction time, where you need to, just like how you edit it?
Yeah, so it's a little easier than it would seem. Usually if you've been watching a movie, if you're like editing the sound for a movie, like I know every line in this movie, I know every expression that the actors made, just because I've had to watch it so much. So after a while, you kind of already know what's coming, and you're able to kind of prepare for that when you're doing your Foley performances. There are people who make careers out of that and who are very, very good at it. I had the honor of seeing like a professional Foley recordist who had like some sort of like predictive kind of like, he would know where the characters were going before they even got there on screen, that kind of thing. And I just tried to emulate that. It's easier than it looks, but it's really about anticipating what the character is doing. And of course, to a certain extent, you have to act it out yourself. So a lot of the times, you know, when a character was running, I wouldn't just, you know, kind of move it up and down. I would actually start running with the cloth in my hand to emulate that. Or if I was doing shoe sounds, I would have to match the pace when I was running. Yeah. So, yeah.
When you're out west, did you have sort of a Foley group?
Oh yeah. It was amazing. So there was a room dedicated to Foley, and it looked like an antique closet. And we had the guy come in, and I mean, I had no idea where anything was because it was just like all cluttered in there. There was like every kind of like plastic bottle, metal bottle, glass bottle. He had a turtle shell. He had saddles. He had a catcher's mitt. He had like
A wet leather chamois?
yes, yeah, yes, like all this like weird like crazy stuff. And then like he would know exactly. He'd be like, oh, we have a scene where somebody is like milling bread and like grinding flour or something, and we need like a rock on a stone, and it's being turned, but it's big. And then he'd bring out like this huge stone, and he'd like get out, and I was like, where did you get that? But yeah, no, it was a phenomenal experience, and it did inform a lot of the things that I did for this project as well. I feel like having that experience made me a lot more equipped to tackle a task like this, because there was definitely a lot more that goes into this than I initially anticipated, but I still felt prepared. So.
I got 2 questions. Quick one first. How many tracks is the Pro Tools session? I know you know the number.
I don't even want to know, to be honest. It had to be at least like 60. At least. Now, granted, I can't take too much credit for that. Like, there is a preset for audio post in there. So if you're ever working on a film, like, you know, it has all the sends and all the tracks, like, you know, made in there. I had to make a couple more myself just for, like, my purposes. But, yeah, no, it got pretty intense. So,
This is super impressive. Like, you must have incredible patience because I get impatient mixing music, let alone 60 tracks. That's something else. My other question is, going back to your internship in Los Angeles, what was like either your biggest takeaway or like most important skill you learned that you then applied to this project?
That's a good question. I think I didn't learn, well, other than like, I learned an ungodly amount of shortcuts because those dudes over there, they use Pro Tools like it's second nature. So like, they taught me a lot of like weird shortcuts and stuff to just make editing a whole lot more efficient. But it's actually probably just practice. I had a lot of experience with mixing music before this because I mix and release my own music, but mixing for film was something that I just did every day at my internship. They would either give me old material or they would get in like a new little short and they would just have me kind of like work on it, like kind of busy work. But it got to the point where, you know, I found myself hearing little things in the mix that I knew to tweak and adjust resonances and that kind of different things that I just wouldn't be able to figure out otherwise if I didn't have the experience doing that. So it's really just repetition. And, you know, you don't have to wait for a gig to come to you. Like, you can just like take the audio out of any movie scene you want and then redo it. Like, I've done that a lot. So, yeah, just practice.
Very cool. Thanks.
So obviously there's like some standard practice for Foley art, like you said, bone breaking, celery, meaty punch some meat. But was there an instance where you had to get actually creative with Foley and like, was there an instance when you got creative with Foley and did it not go quite how you expected it to go? Did it not sound quite as good when you recorded?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I didn't have to do anything too crazy for this movie, and I was able to get a lot of really good deals on sound effects libraries, and those are pretty extensive. So I didn't like have any certain sound that I was like, oh yeah, I can't figure out like where to find that, so I have to like do something on my own. I will say my biggest challenge was probably the footsteps though, because you'd assume like, you know, in a karate movie, there's a lot of footsteps because they're like shuffling around a bunch. And it's really hard to, especially when the camera is panned down to their feet, it's really hard to match up each individual footstep and getting it sounding accurate. So even in the case of like the concrete slabs that I bought and I poured sugar on, like me having to pour sugar on it was something that I figured out because I started recording and I was like, this sounds very flat. It sounds like I'm just like walking on like, almost like a metal panel. And I was like, I need a little crunch for the outside. So that was probably the most creative that I got, like putting sugar on those slabs so that it sounded like the outside kind of thing. And then of course I had to like change shoes and do different things to like, based on the actors. I used a different jacket, you know, based on each actor, that kind of thing.
So I found this presentation very, very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
Really fascinating. I would think we were recording very subtle, very nuanced sounds that the concept of compression probably comes into it. I would think a whoosh of wind or I don't know, someone's sighing to get the whole lead up and the track and the drop off again must be almost impossible without other effects.
Yeah. And sound effects, so in my internship, one of the more surprising things that I learned, aside from that, like, you know, movie audio is all like kind of fake and like, I won't call it fake, but it's like what you see on the screen that looks like it was recorded there is actually very meticulously crafted to give it the illusion that all those sounds were actually happening. One of the things I learned was that for the most part, sound effect libraries and the extensive, you know, those kinds of lead-ups to certain sound effects, you know, wind sound effects, that kinds of thing. They're all in there, and they're the main thing, and the Foley is used to sweeten that, or to kind of make it a little more believable. So I would say in regards to like the challenges in like kind of accurately representing a lot of these sounds, most of the heavy lifting was done by those sound effects libraries, and then it was just like, you're in the case of like, for example, like an actor's breath in one of the beginning scenes. Breath sounds even too, like everybody kind of breathes the same. So you can do what's called automated dialogue replacement, or ADR, which is where after the fact you record dialogue or breath sounds to replicate that. And yeah, I was able to do that for one of the actors, and it still sounded believable because we all kind of breathe the same. So I hope that answered your question.
Great.
But, yeah, thank you.
For those like fast-paced fighting scenes, would you more focus on like the moving cloth and the footsteps, or like the actual music itself?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I found doing this project that I really do love sound design. I mean, I got into all this because I wanted to be a composer, but sound design is a lot of fun. And I kind of equally, I value them both equally. It's always tough though, because when you're making a movie, a lot of the work that you do isn't even heard. It's a lot of the times you can mix it for different environments, like a big movie theater with like, you know, 30 speakers in it is gonna have like a different sound than, you know, just your TV, right? And sometimes you can hear more things in a movie theater than you can at home. But for the most part, a lot of the work that I did was being covered up by things like, or the sound effect work that I did was being covered up by things like the music or the dialogue, right? So it's kind of like a balance that you have to strike between making sure that all of your sound effects can be heard and making sure that the music can be heard and is cool. So you kind of have to like sacrifice sometimes, like, oh, they can't hear as much of my sound effects because this is a really cool moment and I want them to hear the music, that kind of thing. So